Hello, and welcome to another episode of Undiscovered Beasts and Strange Phenomena. Please join our experienced and knowledgeable panel of hosts as we explore the great mysteries of our time: Bigfoot, UFOs, ghosts, and unexplained phenomena.
Hello and welcome. Tonight on Undiscovered Beasts and Strange Phenomena, Mokele-Mbembe. But first, I have the distinction and great honor of introducing my dear friend and fellow colleague, host of the show, Adam Davis. Adam, how are you this evening?
I'm very well, Mike, and how are you feeling?
I'm doing great. It's a fine evening, and very excited about tonight's show, Adam.
Good, excellent. Well, I've got plenty to say, so I'm ready to go when you are.
Well, Adam, just get right into it then. Of course, you know, a lot of times I like to know what spurns someone's interest initially in a particular topic, and of course, there are a few things that might capture one's imagination to the degree of the Mokele-Mbembe, such a great beast thought to be still living in Central Africa, something such massive proportion in such a forbidding and remote area. What ever got you interested in the first place, Adam?
Well, the Mokele-Mbembe is probably the most important cryptid for me that I ever looked for. So, and I'll explain why. I mean, most recently I've been doing a lot of work on man-beasts, hominids, hominoids, and research. But it was the Mokele-Mbembe was my first great passion in cryptozoology. So, cast my mind back to when I first began all this. I was very interested in cryptozoology as a child. Did a lot of tracking of animals and all that sort of thing. But one of the most formative experiences was when I watched a TV series as a very young teenager, maybe slightly younger, and it was called Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World.
Oh,
on
yeah.
Arthur C. Clarke. Yeah, do you remember the series? Well,
one of my favorites. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, on Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World, there was a sequence where it had Professor Roy Mackal from the University of Chicago. And Mackal was very, very interested in looking for this idea of a prehistoric survivor, this creature that could have survived from prehistoric times, the Mokele-Mbembe, which in Lingala means the stopper of the rivers. And the thing I liked about him, I liked his determination, but also I liked the fact that he was fallible. So what do I mean by that? He was a little bit crap, for want of a better word, in a nice way. So most of the explorers you read about, they're quite sort of chisel-jawed in the sense that, you know, it's day 56, my toe drops off, yeah, I ploughed on. Nothing wrong with that. They're very admirable people, but it makes it quite difficult to aspire to those sort of people. But the thing about Mackal was he was setting up his hammock in Central Park, and he was falling out of it. But the thing that he had was he had a lot of passion and he had a lot of determination. And I thought, well, I can aspire to that. I have passion and I have determination. I'm going to go and do that. So it was always my ambition from being a teenager to actually go to the heart of darkness, the Joseph Conrad Heart of Darkness, and look deep within the Congo for evidence of a prehistoric survivor, in this case the Mokele-Mbembe. I always wanted to do it. So everything I did from then on until I went was in some way in preparation for doing that. So the survival courses, the army skills courses, those sort of things, were preparing myself to get ready to go because it was always an ambition of mine. So it always was my ultimate passion, the Mokele-Mbembe, always.
That's fascinating. May I ask you, when you talk about this training, can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, I mean, the training was things like, obviously I'd had a lot of wildlife and skills training. The thing was like survival training. I went to courses run by SAS members and did things like that, just so I could get ready for any potential encounters, should I have them when I got there. And I'd done some basic army. I mean, there was some army training I did as well when I was a reserve to do that sort of thing. So it was getting ready for that, though. That was why I did all those things, was to prepare myself to be able to have the skills necessary. I already had a love of wildlife and a desire to track. I wanted some other core skills so that I could go to look for the Mokele-Mbembe, what I was going to do.
Just to emphasize that a little bit, Adam, that's fascinating to me. So we're talking about a long-term commitment on your part from the beginning to pay a great deal of attention to preparation, even just such great detail as to take those courses and that type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I was very determined to go. I decided I was going to do it, and if I decide I'm really going to do something, I'd do it. You have to really want to do it. So, I mean, it's tangential, but a lot of the life risks. I've taken a lot of life risks. You know I have, and you know I've chanced things. I should already be dead by now. You know all this.
Yeah.
But the risks I've taken are equally meted by desire. So I have to really, if I really want to do something, I'm prepared to take the risk to do it. If I don't want to do it enough, then I won't take the risk to do it. So, for example, when I was a teenager, I had some choices to make about whether I wanted to pursue a career in mountaineering, because I really liked that, or, did I want to climb Everest, or did I want to pursue cryptozoology? I couldn't do both. I couldn't afford to. And there wasn't the time when I was working. So I decided that I wanted to look for the Mokele-Mbembe more than I wanted to climb Everest. And it was as simple a choice as that. Yeah? So, because the life risk to go to somewhere like the Congo, and I don't want to romanticize it all. I'll tell you some stories as we go. But it's extremely dangerous, and I don't want to be. Before we start going down the line, I'm not going to encourage anyone to go to the Congo. I don't want you to do it. So, anybody out there, I don't want you to do it. Only unless you had a lot of preparation and skills, you were experienced in other jungles and you've done a lot of training, I don't want you to go to the Congo. Do not follow my path in this instance.
It is indeed a very dangerous region, and it's still quite dangerous by all accounts. Not just in the sense of its remoteness and difficult terrain, but political unrest and a number of various reasons make it a very challenging proposition. So in the very beginning, when you made your mind up that this was something that was important to you, even more important than mountain climbing, for example, that you just made, it's obviously something that was incredibly important to you. So you made this great commitment to prepare for this mission, hoping, of course, that you would be in a position to succeed and, well, more than anything, not be caught off guard by many of the numerous dangers that would occur or may occur. Now, during the course of this training, did you ever waver and decide, maybe this is a little too much and, mountain climbing might be a little easier and that type of thing?
No, I always wanted to go. I was always like, when it was when it was like Christmas or birthdays, I'd always ask for little pieces of kit that I could try out and practice with, so that I was ready to go. No, it was something I wanted to do, and I thought, what I'll do is I'll prepare and carry on doing it after I go to university. But I always had it as a long-term goal. Yeah.
That's incredible. That says a lot about your level of dedication. And how long did this training process go on before you actually left for the continent?
Well, it was sporadic. It was on and off. I couldn't say, look, I had a 10-year program and this is what I did. It sort of depended on, there were things I'd learn along the way. out of interest and passion, because I like tracking and I like outdoors things. So there were things I'd learned along the way which, I found would be useful. I don't think anything really prepares you for the first time. Kinshasa, the first time I went, it got aborted, the trip, fairly soon. I went with a colleague, and it got aborted very soon because of the civil war that was going on. I mean, the civil war literally started as we were flying in, and I had an RPG, a rocket launcher, pointed at my head at the airport. And I managed to get out. I mean, one stage we stood back to back, I remember. And we had a taxi and it had broken down, and we were on our way to the airport. And we stood back to back, charging the crowd who had circled us. I had to, on the way, even getting into Kinshasa at that time, I had to pull a knife on some guy who threatened me with a knife. So it was not a very nice encounter the first time. It was horrendous. And, I was there for a few days, and that was it. And it was aborted. But
well, let me ask you. Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, what did you want to say?
I was just going to say, now, I hate to laugh at them. Now, it's certainly a very serious matter, but I just had this mental image of you in the middle of nowhere, Africa, with an RPG pointing at your head. At any time, like maybe right about then, did you maybe start thinking, even if there is Mokele-Mbembe, maybe it's not worth all this? Did you falter a little bit then and maybe reconsider?
Interestingly, I didn't, and I would have no problem with telling you I did falter, because it would have been a normal human reaction. But I didn't falter. I was determined to go back. The thing that irritated me most at the time, I mean, obviously I was glad to get out of there. I mean, I saw, there's a whole lot of things I saw which were pretty unpleasant while I was in that airport in Kinshasa as I was trying to get out of the country to leave. And, there were some pretty horrendous experiences. But at the time, what most bothered me was the fact that I had spent 2 years saving up for that trip, and it only lasted a few days. Of course, I was relieved to be out of there. It wasn't a pleasant place, and I couldn't have stayed. The war was they were surrounding the airport at the time, so it was just not a place I could have stayed. But
and just for a frame of reference, Adam, this was in what year was this?
Oh, this was I think it was 1999. Yeah, I think it was. Yeah.
I see.
So since then, Kinshasa's apparently is still not a safe place, but it's a lot safer than it used to be. There's a lot of business that's come in. I think the Chinese have done a lot of investment in there. There were no Chinese in there when I was there, but they've it's a lot calmer than it used to be when this happened. This was a while ago. I mean, it was very young, and it was a long time ago now. So it's better than it used to be. But yeah, so I was determined to go back, and I saved really hard, and exactly a year later, I was back. I was back a year later with a couple of different people. No reflection on the person who was with me the first time; he just couldn't afford it. But I was back with a couple of different people, and I was determined to get to a place called Lake Tele, because Lake Tele in Brazzaville, in the other side, there's two Congos. There's the Democratic Republic and the Republic, but the epicenter of all activity for the Mokele-Mbembe was allegedly Lake Tele in the Congo, and I was determined to get there. And, at the time when I was going, a best-selling book had just come out called Congo Journey. And it gave me a lot of information, or so I thought at the time. I'll come on to that later. Do remind me to tell you. But I was determined to get out there and go and see, and go and look for myself. But I do remember, as I was coming into Kinshasa, and not Kinshasa this time, I flew directly into Brazzaville. But when you fly in, you can see, normally when you fly in a big city, you see all the lights going on in the city. And as you're flying in, I know it's a big city, and there are hardly any street lights. And I remember thinking, oh, here we go again. I wasn't looking forward to landing. As I got there, I was thinking, oh no, it's going to be a nightmare. But I was determined to do it. I was determined to get to Lake Tele, no matter what. No matter what it took, I was going.
Determination, indeed. You came back just a year later with incredible determination, no doubt, to carry out this expedition. If it was within your power to do so, obviously, you were determined just to get it done.
Yeah, absolutely. I was determined to do it. And I saved up again whatever money I had, and I was on my way. And I landed at Brazzaville, and I was there I was going to be in the Congo for a while. I was going to be there a month, and I had to chance my luck that I would be able to get up to Tele, because one of the big things in the Congo is that there's a lot of paperwork that you need to go through in order to succeed. There's a lot of and I'd sent a guy in. The one thing I'd done, which was pretty organised, I'd sent a guy in a few weeks before. A Congolese guy called Jacques had sent him in to get a lot of the paperwork together so that I wouldn't have a problem and I wouldn't spend ages hanging around Brazzaville. I wanted to get out of Brazzaville as soon as possible, get up to the area.
Get out of the
do my research. I didn't want to spend weeks, and I'd realised from previous Westerners who'd gone there before that they'd ended up spending weeks just kicking around Brazzaville, having their money sucked up, and I didn't want that to happen. So when I landed there, I only had to really get one permit. I had to go and see a guy called Marcelin Agnana from the Ministry of Forestry and Fisheries. And these officials, they'll keep you waiting around a while, hours sometimes, before they'll see you, and it's a sign of their power over you, if you like. So, yeah. But I didn't really have to hang around Brazzaville too long. I mean, when I got there, there'd just been a civil war on that side of the Congo, for all sorts of reasons, which I won't go into today. But, as I walked round, there were bullet holes in all the shops. I literally crunched empty rounds as I walked through the streets. So there were just bullets everywhere. And at night, you'd hear gunfire going off in the city. So I was keen to leave and get on there. So after a few days of paperwork, I managed to get... one thing you have to be aware of in these countries is that you can't get through them without doing something called a petit cadeau, which is the French for a small gift. Because a lot of these people are not paid or not paid very much, and they rely these sort of bribes, for want of a better word, in order to live. Yeah. That's how they function. So you have to make sure that you pay these people and do that. And I got on this, subsequently, I managed to get out of Brazzaville fairly quickly and got on this old Anatov plane with my companion next to me, a trusty old goat, which bayed all the way there. It was an old Russian Anatov, old battered plane. I learned that not long after that I was on this plane that one of them crashed, and I think it might have been one of the planes I was on there and back. But I went to Mfondo, which is a border town between the Democratic Republic and the Republic of the Congo, and I got my passport promptly taken off me when I landed and was invited to see the local warlord, a guy called Gilbert. So I landed, and I'll tell you about it in a minute, but yeah, I managed to get to the jungle remarkably quickly, but I'd done a lot of groundwork, and I'd learned from my first abortive experience what I should do. And I think that's important, you can try again and learn from your mistakes, and I did. And I was fortunate enough to get out there.
When you finally got in this position, I know you were very eager to try to get to Lake Tele. What lied ahead at that point? I mean, I know the region, that the terrain is very difficult, so how did you try to make this approach? Is it a situation where you could drive in so far and then it was just a matter of walking it?
Well, the first thing that you have to do is negotiate the officials. And the soldiers, and then we'll come on to the terrain, if I may. Is that all right, Mike?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. So what you often get or you did get at this particular time, is you get a lot of boy soldiers. So the Civil War had just ended there, and there were a lot of children running around with guns. And they're quite difficult to reason with. So I've done a lot of negotiation, and in the past when I've worked as a lawyer, a sort of lawyer, for want of a better word, it's a long explanation, for the British government, I dealt with people who were, I dealt with war criminals before that. What you have is these kids who are high on weed, completely stoned, with a Kalashnikov in their hand. I mean, one boy I saw must have been about 11 years old. He couldn't have been any, and he's got a gun, and he's seen a lot of war, and he's immune to war, and life is cheap to them. So, when I stood on the Abangi River one day, because the Civil War was still going ahead on the other side of the river, there was, I was watching the artillery fires, and some guy started shooting at me across the river because he thought I might be a white mercenary. So he started shooting at me across the river. And these they're impossible to reason with, these people. You can't sort of say, let's sit down, and have a chat. They're scarred by war, but you still have to remember they're children. So you see some horrendous things. And you have to be able to deal with them in a calm manner and make sure that the people you're with are calm too. You have to have a relaxed environment, because sudden movement or aggression or temper can get you shot or can get them shot. And it's just a whole different ball game there. So when I was there, I met this. I had to go and see permission from this warlord called Gilbert, and I was aware he'd been involved in some, let's just say, some things which were not pleasant in the south of the country. I don't want to traumatize any of the people who were listening, but he was, and and it was necessary for me to be polite and respectful to him, so that we all lived. But on a lighter note, I did in Imfondo meet some, as well as some very nice missionaries. I met some missionaries there. I'll just say something about them, because there was a guy there was Paul Olin and Joe Harvey. And Joe Harvey, I was humbled in his presence, because I did think, well, all of them, but I did think, and we'll come back to them at the end of this account, if I may, because I did think, well, there goes a good person, a very good person, a great person than I. I mean, his partner, from what I can recollect, died of cerebral malaria. I mean, as in his medical partner. And he'd carried on working there and practicing there. I helped out in the hospital when I came back out of the jungle. And, I was holding down this woman. There wasn't enough anesthetic, and she'd got an infection. And the guy who's helping to hold her down with me, half his face had collapsed through leprosy, and there's artillery flare going off. I mean, horrendous conditions. He could work in America, or could have worked in America and made millions, but he chose to do that. So that's the environment you're in, and it's very, very tough.
Yeah, that is tough, Adam. That's
there's gunfire all the time.
You just painted right there, buddy. That's not like average life here for most of our listeners.
No. It's a very, very tough Civil War environment, and that was the environment I was in at the time. I mean, going to the jungle, I think, I got a transport down. I think it was to a place called Apina. I had a monkey on my leg for most of the time, and you just as many pieces of physically possible are wedged in this tiny little van thing. And then from there, what you have to do is get pirogues, canoes, across to a village called Boa, which is on the edge of this area, and it takes days. It's nice. I saw parrots and stuff like that, but I think it took a couple of days, and the floods were particularly bad that year. So we basically went by canoe, stopping at a couple of villages along the way until we got to Boa. And Boa, the people there. Oh, I did. By the way, I should say I met pygmies when I was in Imfondo as well, who are wonderful, beautiful people. And you know, I liked them a lot. They were very, very helpful. I played drums with them as well, which was very cool. I was the first person to play drums with them. And the ladies have their teeth filed into points, or the older ones did, as a fashion item. It's not caught on in the West, and I can see why. But there we are. So I met Pygmies, and they were great. And then I get to Boa, which is the gateway village, which is the village which you want to go to if you want to access Lake Tele.
So this gateway village is just because of the lay of the land, and it's just the only civilization in the neighborhood, so to speak?
Yeah, and also the locals there regard Boa. I mean, one of the things that people, let me just again go off on a little tangent because I want to make this point. I think it's important. I mean, when I got a message today, I was running about, I had a lot to do today. Tuesday's a really busy day for me because I do a lot of teaching on Tuesday. And I got a message just on when I was on one of my breaks off a guy I know, nice guy, and he's like, well, there's not a lot of information on the Congo and the Mokele-Mbembe today. And it was a point that you made, and there isn't a lot of information because very few people have gone there. And some of the people who've said they've gone and claimed to have gone there have just made it up. And I learned that to my horror when I got to Boa. John Kirk's been in the Cooler Basin, and he's done it. But there's some people who have just made it up. And one of the, at the time, this is to the best of my knowledge, there was a best-selling book called Congo Journey by Redmond O'Hanlon when he claimed to have spent some time with the people of the village of Boa and gone to Lake Tele and all of this, but they'd never heard of him. So either the villagers were lying, or Redmond O'Hanlon was lying, but that was a best-selling book. I'm not going to say who was lying, but you draw your own conclusion. And there was Herman Augustus as well. He said he'd been there and they'd never heard of him. And I was quite shocked by that. And I think, you know, to the best of my knowledge, apart from me and Roy Mackle, we're the only people who made it to Tele, to this epicenter of the activity. Bill Gibbons might have done, but I'm not sure. I don't think so. But there's very few Westerners who've done it, and it's not a badge thing. I'm just making that point that some people, like myself and like John, have suffered to get there, and you do suffer. Whereas other people have made a lot of money writing books and made up their bullshit. so
right. Right.
But when you get to Boa, what you've got to do is cross a swamp, which is 56 kilometres. And it's described by Colonel John Blatchford Snell as hell on earth. It's really tough, Mike. And I had a full pack, which probably weighed, I keep jumping from metric to pounds, but that's because I live in America. But my pack, so I'm sort of in between the metric and the imperial system. But the pack weighed about 50 pounds, at least. It's a heavy pack, and I'm wading through water because the rains have been particularly bad. If you get a season where it's dry, you know, you could be lucky, and it could be like flat land, and it's pretty much, you just walk there. But the rains have been particularly bad when I was there, and you end up just walking through water waist deep to there, yeah? And it's something of a rite of passage. So, you know, when you're going along there, before we even go, one of the things that I thought was pretty cool was that the villagers in Boa, they had a party before we left, and we had something called Whiskey at the Village, which smelled like it was from a toilet. Didn't quite taste as bad, but what they were judging, it was like you had to dance, and if you're a good dancer, they thought you'd be a good hunter, and you had the spirit within you. I mean, these people were tribal people. They had spears. I don't know whether they still do now, but they hunted with spears. They were barefoot. You know, when I took a photograph with a flash, the elders of the village ducked because they'd never seen it. They thought it was lightning. And their society was very divided and hierarchical. They had chiefs who were elected. They had spiritual chiefs, and they had divisions within the village. And they went through this whole ritual where they thrust the spears in my face and danced to see if I'd flinch. Of course, I didn't flinch, to see how tough I was. And then afterwards, we had this dance, and you know, And they said, well, you're going to be a good hunter. You can dance well. And I was just a bit drunk, yes, but I managed to do that. Any British person, any British male, if they ever want to get a girlfriend, has to learn how to dance when they're drunk. So I had no problem. I could do that. Then, after that, you pack your stuff and you set off to go to Lake Tele and wade through that horrendous swamp.
A swamp of massive proportion. Again, you say 50 odd kilometers.
Yeah, and it's very, very humid. And it's you feel every 56. I mean, and as well, because it takes a long time, I would never let any of the locals eat anything that was rare, but I would let them eat what they normally eat because I'm fine with that. I just wouldn't let them eat rare species if we came across them. But I would let them eat what they normally eat in the jungle to survive. It would be, it would be impossible to get them all there. So our party sets off, and one of the things, for example, I was a monkey. There's a whole story behind that, which some of the people will have heard, but I caught it unaware. Yeah, I ate a monkey. Well, I ate it. It was unaware. I caught it out because it was masturbating and it wanted to finish itself off. So me and shot it and ate it. And it wasn't. It wasn't the best taste. But it was the monkey or nothing. So and then everywhere you go, there's these damn sweat bees. As soon as you stop, these bees will cover you and they'll sting you occasionally. They didn't sting me a lot. I mean, my right hand swelled up. I couldn't grip with my right hand properly. I remember my hand was all swollen up because I'd been stung a few times with my hand by the bees. So and then everything you grip is full of thorns, and some of the creatures you've got to be particularly careful of. So, for example, the forest elephant. If I ever saw tracks of those, I'd work out a way to go nowhere near them because if they saw people, they'd attack you. They're very aggressive, little elephants, and they're very dangerous. So you've got a lot.
Al, let me just stop you there for a minute, just real quick, just to emphasize now, when you're talking about these tribal peoples and the practice of eating bushmeat or whatever, it's not uncommon, and there's nothing unusual or unethical to those folks about that practice.
No, it's what they do. Yeah, it's what they do.
It's just what they do.
But yeah, it's their. I mean, these are people who walk barefoot through the jungle. So they'll walk barefoot through the jungle, and every now and again they'll get a thorn. But what they'll have is a little knife blade or a razor blade, and just nip the thorn out and carry on walking. So they couldn't. They didn't have shoes. These are very tribal people, and this is what they do. There's no McDonald's nearby or Burger King.
There's no drive-through because we're eating monkeys.
No, it's monkey burger or nothing. So that's what you eat.
Right. So you're wading across this massive swamp and of course suffering in great detail. No doubt with the bee stings and all this stuff. Did anybody in the group feel like they wanted to turn back at that time?
Well, no, because I was paying those guys to go. Yeah. There was also but no, they didn't. I mean, they were quite happy. They have a spiritual connection almost with the Mokele-Mbembe, and they wanted to see it. So the young men who hadn't seen one really wanted to see one because they would get extra kudos within their tribe if they did see one. So it was they were excited. It made them more manly if they could see one, and they were desperate.
Yeah, you go out there and get your Mokele-Mbembe badge or whatever, and then
Yeah. I mean, I remember one of them saying to me, "Oh, can you?" His father was a chief, and he said, "Can you tell my father I saw one?" Because his father had seen one, you see. And he said, "Can you tell my father I've seen one because he'll be so proud?" I said, "Well, I'm not going to lie to your father. If you haven't seen one, if you don't see one so much, you don't see one, and that's going to be." So he was disappointed by that, but that's the way it was. I wasn't gonna BS. If we didn't see one, we didn't see one. So you do this trekking, and then the last, just sort of, as you get to the last bit, I think it's like 3 kilometers. The last bit, it's basically all these routes. Basically, you have to jump from one route to another. The last 3 kilometers are horrendous. So we stopped after a few days traveling through the jungle. We stopped just before this last bit, which is you basically jumping from one route to another because we were too tired to do that night. And what you have when you go through the jungle is you have a wet kit and a dry kit. And I remember changing into my dry kit ready to sleep, and I just slept in what, we made shelters at the night. I couldn't afford expensive gear, so I just slept like the locals. And I remember the next morning looking for my boxer shorts down the path, and they weren't there because the termites had built a big nest on them. It was quite. But the next morning, I set off, and I remember we were singing all these songs, about fatiguing, no, we're not tired, we're going to make it. They speak French, some of these guys, as well as Lingala. But I was conscious that if I made a mistake there, if I did fall off any of these routes, then if I break an ankle there, I'd be dead. I mean, there's no way. I would have been in a lot of trouble. I did bust my toe, and to this day, my toe went black. My toe went black. To this day, I can't grow a toenail on my properly on my left foot. But I was covered in cuts. I remember when I got to Tele, I was just exhausted, and there was this rite of going into the water, which you did. And I remember just walking into that water, and it's very warm water. And Tele's very shallow, apart from a channel in the middle of it, which is deep. And I thought I finally made it, and I was exhausted. And the next day, I wanted to do a survey of the lake. And I got in this pirogue, and I just lay there letting all my wounds dry out. And I looked, and then these butterflies landed on me, and there's this like carpet of blue butterflies that landed on me. And it was remarkable, and I loved it. And I looked up, and there above me is a gorilla picking its nose on the top of the tree, just watching me. And it was very cool. It's one of the sweetest life memories I'll ever have. Thinking I've got here, and look at what I'm experiencing. It was like a reward for my suffering. So I love that. And,
that's incredible.
It was an amazing experience. And there's so much to tell you, and there's so little time. But I did a survey of the lake because one of the things that no one had been ever clear about was whether Tele had tributaries that went off into the other areas. And it was quite clear it did. It was quite clear that it interconnected through a lot of the Lakula swampland. And as I say, Tele itself is a really shallow lake. You can pretty much wade it for much of it, but there's this deep channel in the middle which things could move around backwards and forwards from. And so I did a survey, obviously looking out for evidence. There was an alleged kill of the Mokele-Mbembe, I think in the 1950s, I think 56 or something, by some pygmies. And I went to the area where they were supposed to have killed it, but it was so overgrown with jungle, of course, it would be impossible to tell. But this was where the pygmies allegedly had a camp. And I looked for any evidence.
Enough what's connected to that kill, Adam, quickly, is it true? It was rumored that all that ate the meat were passed away.
Yeah, it was rumored that
you heard that as well? There was a rumor circulating associated with it.
Yeah. And I should mention that the Japanese had also been to this area. They got into trouble because they didn't pay their guides properly, so they had to get somebody to come in and out. And there's a photograph which you can see, which people say, is it Mokele-Mbembe? Well, that's just a tree stump. And I went to that area as well and had a look at that. So I did a thorough survey and investigation. Well, one of the things again I had to do was learn how to hunt crocodile. So I'm going to show you how to do that, Mike. You can learn a life skill now. So you ready?
Okay, I'm ready, Adam.
Okay, so basically what you have to do to hunt crocodile is you have to sound like you're a horny female crocodile. So basically, what you do is you go like this. Have a go. Let's try, Mike.
All right, do that again, because I want to hear that again. Let me turn my volume up.
Right, ready?
That was good.
All right, hang on. I'll just have a sip. It's your turn.
I can't do it.
You became
I'm not very horny, apparently.
So basically, when you're doing that noise, we won't go into it too much, but you also swish your paddle in the water so that you're making the sound of a crocodile's tail, and then you spear them. So that's what you do, and then you eat them. They taste a bit like cod, the tail, like codfish. So I ate those.
Well, I've
but
called
I
a
didn't do it
turkey and a few other things, but I don't believe I've ever called a crocodile.
No, well, there you go. Now, if you practice your call, you'll be able to.
Yeah, I definitely need to work on that a little bit. I'll have to go back and listen to the show.
When we're offline, we're going to practice that call of yours. We're going to get we're going to get you ready.
Yeah, it needs a little work.
So one of the things that I think was interesting is, I'd taken pictures of different species of animals with me, and I'd interviewed both the pygmies and the Bantus, because they're different tribes, about people who'd said they'd seen it and hadn't seen it. And one of the things that was interesting is they described a creature that looks like a smaller version of an Apatosaurus, interestingly enough. But they did say that the creature the female was without a horn, but the male had a horn, and the horn they described was it was a large horn that the male had, a single horn on the middle of its head, almost like a rhino horn. But they weren't describing a rhino. I showed them pictures of rhinos, and they were very clear it was not a rhino or a rhino derivative. I mean, I don't know what it is. It's difficult to say. There are creatures which have survived from prehistoric times, and there may be some still existing today. I mean, most notably, of course, the crocodile and the sea lion, things like that. And they have adapted to the environment. So has the Congo been unchanged for 65 million years plus? Well, probably not, no. It was probably grassland, even only 10, 20,000 years ago. But have creatures which are prehistoric survived and adapted to modern times? Well, yes, they have. And a good example is obviously the crocodile. You can even see them in arid areas of the desert. So it's not impossible it could be a prehistoric creature. What's more likely, I think, is that it's some new species which we really don't know about. I mean, the area is vast. The area of that particular Carl is, it's the size of Switzerland plus, and when you're in an area like that, and it's so large, you really don't know what's out there. And I've been in a few places like this where people have no clue. I mean, I was in parts of India, I remember, when I was looking for something called Mandi Barung. And I spoke to a government official there, and he said, well, 70% of this here jungle that you're about to walk into, we really haven't surveyed, and we don't know what's here. So it's difficult to say. I mean, I didn't find anything tangible, any scientific evidence when I was there of the creature. Interestingly, what the locals told me was that there was another place where there were a higher concentration of these creatures, and I looked at a satellite map afterwards to cross-reference their description of this place, and it exists where there's a greater number of these creatures. And maybe one day I'll go back and look. We'll see. But I did come away with a feeling from those locals, from those local people, that it was a real tangible creature, which was the important thing. And I challenged them. I did say to them, is this a spiritual creature? Is this a paranormal creature? And they got very offended by that. And it was like, this isn't a cultural idiosyncrasy to paraphrase their words, this is a real creature for us. Don't suggest it's something that's a part of our fitful imaginations. This is something that we consider to be a real creature, and you should be aware of that, and you kind of need to respect that. Was the attitude I got both from Pygmies and Bantus, so very different tribal people with different customs who don't actually like one another all that much. There's no symbiotic association unless it's one of need, and they were consistent in that, and they were consistent in their physical descriptions of what this creature looked like, and that was fascinating.
But that's consistency. That's very encouraging to see that, and it's also interesting to denote that in both cases, even though the animal may have spiritual significance and importance in their society, it is very much undoubtedly a very real physical entity, another animal in their animal kingdom, if you will.
Yeah, very much so. It's an important part of their ecosystem, and it was considered, as I say, a great honour to have seen this creature amongst the tribes. And I do wish I had seen it. That Lakula swampland is vast, and there is a lot of potential there for something which is a herbivore essentially. They showed me plants it ate, to exist in that area and to remain largely undetected, especially if it was very rare. I see nothing remotely implausible about that. It's based on my experiences, it's more likely than not that this thing is still knocking around. I can't tell you exactly what it is, but I'm fairly comfortable with the notion that it is still there and it waits to be discovered, unless it dies out for whatever reason. I think they're probably very rare. I mean, the tribe said they were rare, but I have information as to where they might be. So one day maybe I'll go back. We'll see. It's a lot of money and it's pretty dangerous. But I got a good feeling about it. When we made the unpleasant trek back to Boa village, it was quite nice actually. We were greeted something like returning heroes. It was great. Everyone was out. All the villagers were screaming and dancing with joy, and we had a party again with all the drums going, and we danced again, and it was great. I really enjoyed it. And they were very friendly to me.
That's fantastic. They were probably just happy you guys made it back alive from the sounds of things.
Well, yeah, they were happy their own people made it back alive. It's not an easy trip. And they brought back a load of smoked fish. I mean, we had a load of smoked fish, which was very good. Not everything was horrendous. We had some smoked fish, and I did enjoy that, but the rest of it was not that great. The fruit was good. So
you touched on something a minute ago, Adam. If I may interject here just for a moment. By all accounts, this animal is said to be a herbivore and feed on primarily, often reported to, in any case, to feed on vegetation hanging over riverbanks and likes to frequent the bends of rivers and that type of thing. And indeed, in some cases, according to some witnesses, there's been, accounts where vegetation has clearly been consumed by something that apparently had the reach equivalent of a giraffe, perhaps.
Yeah, and it was pointed out to me what sort of vegetation they might eat and how they might do it. I mean, there was one very adrenaline-fueled chase across Lake Tele where we paddled furiously because we thought we might have seen something, but it didn't transpire that we did. But yeah, there's plenty of vegetation for a herbivore to eat. It's not going to struggle in the jungle. So yeah, it's a large creature, and it can move about those channels and waterways. Uncharted number of miles. We don't really know how many miles those waterways would have, and what might be there. So it's an amazing place.
That's an incredible concept. That's fascinating. And, of course, being a large animal, it probably does like to frequent deep pockets of water from time to time with the heat and whatnot. That's probably convenient for it. Now, I know part of the ecology of the region is a big difference like between what they call the wet season, the rainy season, and the dry season there. And do you think that is a modifier of behavior that would somehow affect, hypothetically, this thing? Now, we don't know what it's really doing or what its lifestyle is like too much, but hypothetically, it's been insinuated that it might dig itself into the banks of rivers or that type of thing in the dry season.
Well, the dry season still has swamps and channels. I mean, it could easily dig itself into banks. It may well make dens. We're not really sure. I mean, it's often described as the stopper of the rivers. It's probably semi-aquatic, but other than that, much of its behavioural patterns are anecdotal guesswork. We know very little about it. It's such a rare and unusual animal in such a remote area. We know very, very little about it. I mean, I'm sure, for example, that some of the time when I was walking around the lake, I'm sure that the people hadn't walked in some of those places I was in. When I was doing my survey, there was no evidence apart from the pygmy camp on the other side. It's just so remote, and observing these things, it's not really been done by anybody with any sense of scientific recognition, without being disparaging. So all of it's guesswork. But the bottom line, I think, is could the ecosystem support it? And I think it definitely could. Yeah.
Well, there would certainly be no shortage of vegetation to consume, you would think, as you pointed out. Certainly a lush green area that goes on, and like you say, to a large degree, almost uncharted at all. I mean, we just don't know what's in there. But we do know it's a very dangerous, remote, and forbidding place. And no one perhaps knows that better than yourself from what we've heard over the last 50 minutes or so. And I'm just completely captivated by all this, Adam, on a personal level. It's always kind of been a favorite topic of mine, and there is not a lot of information like you touched on earlier, and it's been really great to have this conversation. A couple things real quickly, and we only have 5 minutes or so left, but yeah. I was thinking you would mostly concur that the animal size is somewhat in relationship maybe to that of an elephant?
Yeah, I would. It's very similar to an elephant, but obviously not an elephant. And you know, I've heard some people say, "Oh, could it be an elephant?" Absolutely not. Yeah. The locals are well familiar with elephants. I talked to you about forest elephants as well, and I also showed you that distinction of the one singular horn on the head. It's definitely not an elephant. And there's no question.
That's not elephant-like, right? But elephant size and stature.
Elephant size, yeah. Elephant size, definitely.
And there's been a few occasions where Westerners over the last couple of centuries have reported possibly encountering tracks or trackways, and it has been reported at least a couple times that these very large tracks, the size of a frying pan to a couple, maybe 3 feet across, even in one case, they tend to have 3 toes, which is a little unusual in that that doesn't really match with a lot of the animals we're familiar with.
Yeah, I've read those accounts like you, but I never saw any evidence of tracks which would persuade me that they could be a creature which might have resulted from the Mokele-Mbembe when I was there. I just didn't see them. And trackways were difficult to find because around Tele, as I say, it's basically these swamp branches, you know, as you jump from branch to branch. There is some terra firma on one side of it, but it's quite difficult. I didn't see any tracks, and I looked, which were not animals which were already recognised while I was there. I wish I had, but I just didn't.
Yes, well, unfortunately, we don't always get a payoff in the way we think we will get the reward. And, of course, with you on your second trip, when you finally made it to the lake, that was very, very rewarding, I'm sure, for you to lay there in that boat and look up and see that gorilla picking his nose, looking down at you. That had to be very moving.
Yeah, it was. And there was another, if I may just tell you another moving account, which will always stay with me, this other thing that would always stay with me for the rest of my life. So when I got back to Mfondo, I get back, and it's nearly Christmas by this stage, and I'm hoping I can get out of the Congo and go through all these hoops in order to get out of the Congo before Christmas, because I wanted to spend some time with my family at Christmas. And the missionaries say to me, could you do us a favour? Could you post some letters for us back to our family? There's no way we could get them back without you and a little packet that they give me. And I'm like, yeah, sure, no problem. I have no problem with that at all. And so they said, well, we'll make it now. And obviously, I'm ready to get my flight. So they're making it. But as they're making it, I hear all this, they sing this song. We sing this song that night. We have some Christmas carols around the Christmas tree. And, of course, we're all sweating. And, my shirt on the way back was literally ripped to pieces. I had a new shirt on because the thorns had literally ripped it to pieces. I'm there, and we're sat round the tree. And we're singing, and I'll never forget it. We're singing Silent Night, and then the gunfire's there. Holy night, all is calm, all is bright. And that's what was going on. And I took the package, and I thanked them, and I left. And I'll never forget that. I got the plane the next morning, got to Brazzaville, had a horrible time there for a few days where I got stuck. But that's a whole different story. But eventually, I made it back to England, and I was very fortunate that I did. But I do have a lot of life memories of that time in the Congo, and the aspiration. But when I got to Tell and I got back, I thought, well, I achieved what I wanted to. It's unrealistic of me to expect I'm definitely going to find a Mokele-Mbembe. But it was something that I worked for years to achieve, and I got there, and I thought, I've done this. And I was glad of it. And I've seen and done some remarkable things. And that was what I took away from the experience. And I also took away from the experience that there was a good degree of probability that the Mokele-Mbembe, in whatever form it takes as an animal, exists, at least for now.
And still waits to be discovered.
Yeah, I think so. Still waits.
Well, that was a very moving account, Adam. And we're about out of time this week, folks. Well, Adam, I just want to thank you personally for allowing me to be part of your show and for sharing so much great stuff with me and all the listeners this evening. What a great show it was.
I'm glad you enjoyed it, Mike. I'm glad. I know you wanted to talk about the Mokele-Mbembe, so I'm glad it's made you happy that we did the show tonight. Thank you.
It was incredible. And folks, don't forget to tune in next week. That's it. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Adam. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone. Thank you, Mike.